Well, hello, everybody. My name is Olaya Landavillard, and on the slide that you're looking at, you also see the name of my doc student. Her name is Laura Lynn Randalls, and she is a certified orientation and mobility specialist. And I collaborated with her as I am the TVI, and she is the O&M. I collaborated with her to put this presentation together because I feel that it's really important to get the input of the orientation and mobility specialist when we're looking at collaborative assessment between the TVI and the O&M. So I don't want to pretend to be the expert in the O&M area of assessment. However, I have a lot of experience conducting collaborative assessments with a team of professionals, including the orientation mobility specialist, the speech and language pathologist, of course the TVI, a school psychologist. Sometimes I was the educational diagnostician and not the TVI. Sometimes I was a TVI, or sometimes I had to serve as both. And so as being a part of a collaborative assessment team, it's really important to be able to assess a student in the most efficient way possible, especially if the student is really young and we are trying to figure out how much support the student's going to need. And some of the video that you will see later in the presentation is showing the collaborative assessment, and to give you some example of that. But I will be asking you all to be making note of some of the skills that you would be looking for as a TVI or as the O&M. And if you're dual certified, you would be looking for some of the same things, sometimes some of the different things. But I'd like you to make note of those things. And then towards the end, we will try to do this collaborative assessment or collaborative participation part of the presentation, even though we're doing this as a webinar, where you would be able to go onto a website and input some of the skills that you saw, and that would be something the TVI would assess, and some of the skills that you saw that would be something the orientation and mobility person would assess, and then some of the things that are in common. So I will show a picture of a Venn diagram that has a bunch of sticky notes on it, because we have done this presentation together before, myself and my doctoral student, Laura Lynn Randalls, and allowed people in the room to come up to the Venn diagram and put their sticky notes where they thought the skill was best assessed, either under the TVI role or under the O&M role, or if they were overlapping. And so that's kind of the goal of this presentation, is to show how similar we are when it comes to what it is that we're looking for in our assessments. We are more similar than we are different. And so I want to just move on and give you an idea of a little bit of my background. I am an assistant professor in low vision and blindness. I am a certified teacher of the visually impaired. I'm also an educational diagnostician, and I came through a national program called the National Leadership Consortium in Sensory Disabilities. That's what helped me get my doctorate and fill a place at a university that had a program that was in danger of closing and not having a full-time faculty member on board. So I've been here for the last 5 years at Illinois State, and I was lucky enough to get a doctoral student. Her name is Laura Lynn Randalls, and she is a certified orientation mobility specialist. She has her Master's of Science in Special Education for teacher of the visually impaired, and her orientation mobility degree from Northern Illinois University. She's also a certified O&M. She has served as a committee member as an expert on the subject matter for orientation mobility on ACB REP. She's also what we call a developmental therapist vision and a developmental therapist O&M in Illinois. In order to serve early intervention, you have to have a credential that is called developmental therapist vision and developmental therapist O&M. Sometimes the therapist word being thrown in there can confuse people because we're not therapists. However, that's the way Illinois has chosen to label that profession. She is a doctoral student here at Illinois State, and she's also a National Leadership Consortium and Sensory Disabilities Scholar. So we're really excited to have her here, and really excited that we were able to put this presentation together for you, to kind of give you a sense of how we can work together in the field when we're doing assessments, and be able to complete assessments in the most efficient way possible. So basically, who am I as the TVI? As the TVI, I am a licensed special educator. I also provide specialized instruction in the areas of the expanded core curriculum. I adapt classroom materials and lessons for Common Core. I have lesson plans to meet student-specific vision-related IEP goals. I'm part of the IEP team for students with visual impairments. I provide resources for families, students, and staff about visual impairments through in-services, materials, and collaborative time. I also work with the Department of Rehab to help students with visual impairments transition out of K-12. I'm not a vision therapist. I'm not a content area teacher or an O&M. And so this may be something that others know who are listening to this webinar, but I also want to reach some of maybe the newer people in the field, just to kind of delineate the differences between the two, because sometimes we are asked to do things that are outside of the scope of our practice because of shortages or what have you. And so it's really important to be able to delineate the two, and what we are as TVIs, and then also who we are as if you are an O&M. So Laura Lynn is talking about herself here, that she is an O&M specialist who has received training in the specialized area. She provides instructions for students with visual impairments on how to travel independently and safely in a variety of environments. She has lesson plans to meet students' specific orientation and mobility related IEP goals. She consults with PE teachers and extracurricular sponsors to adapt environments, equipment, or physical tasks to fully include students with visual impairments. She can be a part of the IEP team for students with visual impairments as a related service. She can also provide resources for family, students, and staff about visual impairments and travel skills. She works also with the Department of Rehab to help students with VI transition out of K-12. And she also is stressing she is not a physical therapist, adaptive PE teacher, or a vision teacher. And we should also add she's not an occupational therapist either. And so you can see just between the two lists how some of the things overlap, and how some of the things that she is and that I am as a TVI, we have similar goals, similar job duties. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that. However, we still have things that we can do that are within the scope of our credentials or certification. And we have to be very leery about not stepping outside of that, even if we're asked sometimes to do so. So TVI responsibilities in relation to orientation and mobility. The teacher or students with VI is responsible for doing the following, okay, in relation to orientation and mobility. We are responsible for teaching skills that enable students to maximize the use of their remaining senses, such as through localization of sounds and tactile discrimination, which you can kind of see how both of those can tie in to orientation and mobility as well, and the skills that they are responsible for teaching. We as TVIs can incorporate basic O&M skills like the human guide technique, protective techniques, trailing, and familiarization with the room. And so we also, looking at the human guide technique, I know that there is some in the field that would rather take out the human guide and just say the guide technique or assisted guide, because sometimes we don't have a human guide, we have a guide dog. So I think in just trying to be, in the interest of inclusivity, trying to make sure that I am pointing that out as well. So as a TVI, we definitely would incorporate those basic O&M skills, especially the guiding and the trailing and familiarization with the room, because as TVIs, we have to make sure our students are aware of their surroundings, can find their stuff in their classroom, where to hang their cane, where to hang their backpacks, and then of course find the facilities, the restroom, the cafeteria, other areas on campus. And so that's also part of what the orientation mobility specialist does, but also what we can do as well to support what the orientation mobility is trying to accomplish with the student without overstepping our bounds. Then we also monitor student safety when traveling independently within and around the school. We collaborate with parents, students, the O&M specialist, and general education teachers regarding O&M issues and concerns. So as a team, as a collaborative team, these things are things that we do already. Sometimes we do them separately, but most of the time in my experience, I've always done them with an O&M. Especially when bringing concerns or issues up to the school, trying to have that united front that we are both supporting the student in our respective roles, and that we are in agreement with what some of the issues are and how to work through those issues and find a solution to that, to those concerns or any issues that are going on. But having that collaborative, togetherness and common goals definitely portrays that united front to the schools, that we are doing what we're trying to do is in the best interest of the child, and we are not just coming up with our own ideas. We are working together to help you find the solution and work with us. We also, as TVIs, promote attitudes among school personnel and members of the community that foster that independent travel by students with visual impairment. Part of what we have to do, and what I teach my students to do, is do a VI 101 for the whole school, so that you can talk about visual impairments and why it's important that the student is included in everything at the school, and that they are just like every other student, and they deserve the same respect and participation opportunities and access that every other student in that school has. But you also educate them on the students' needs so that they can have access to their free or appropriate public education and have access in the safest manner possible for them. So looking at the purpose of assessment, and, again, I'm not trying to, insult anybody's intelligence by going through and giving definitions and things like that. But I just want to be sure that for any of the newer individuals who are coming into the field, just to reiterate, assessment is the process of collecting data for the purpose of making appropriate educational decisions about students. Okay, so I always tell my students that we collect data, yes, but data does not make decisions. People make decisions. And I got that from a TED Talk, and it was just profound to me. Like, it was just this aha moment. Like, yes, we do need to collect data, but data can't speak on its own. We have to look at that data and then use it and talk about it to make appropriate educational decisions about students, especially our kids. Our kids are not cookie cutter. Our kids are not standard. So using a standardized score or anything like that from any kind of a data collection process is not something I recommend for students that we work with, especially with my background as an educational diagnostician. I am very, very careful about making assumptions and making decisions based on just cold hard data without using our ability to look at the data and say, okay, for this child who has a visual impairment, is this data really representative, or this score really representative of where the child is and what they can do? So we have to always be really careful with that, and we have to be able to advocate for our children, our students. I say children because, they all seem to become part of you, whether you want them to or not. And I think that's one of the big joys of doing this job. But we really have to look at assessment from more of a subjective point of view than just the objective point of view when you're getting just scores and check marks and pluses and minuses. We need to really look at the child and the whole child and their scope of opportunities they may have had, their scope of how much education they've had, you know, all of these things before we make any major decisions when we're looking at assessment data. So when we're looking at assessments, the two different types of assessments, teachers with visually impaired, we are responsible for the functional vision assessment, the learning media assessment, and the assistive technology assessment, right? Part of that process is we make these recommendations based on our findings, right? And looking at the functional vision, learning media, assistive technology, we look at that and recommend adaptations on how to adapt assessments for the classroom, how to adapt written and visual information so that other specialists can know about what types of adaptations our students need to be able to access what it is that they're trying to do. So really we are using the information from our assessments to guide accommodations and access for our students. Now, the orientation and mobility specialist obviously is responsible for the O&M assessment. However, in my experience, whenever I was doing any assessments, functional vision, learning media, AT, I always had an O&M specialist with me. And that was always really nice because, again, we're going to be looking at some of the same skills, but also the O&M needs to understand the level of functional vision that the student has, so that they know kind of what they need to do is for their assessment, and the things that they need to be looking for regarding an O&M assessment. Something that as a TVI, I don't know exactly what they're looking for because I'm not an O&M. I've never had to conduct an O&M assessment. However, I have been involved as a collaborator with an O&M, helping them complete an assessment by giving them information from my assessments as well. So the other thing O&Ms do as part of assessments is they also help adapt assessments for physical therapy, physical education, any functional or vocational travel programs. So that is another big part, and that is a big difference between the two of us. However, we still would want to collaborate, and if our students are getting PT, sometimes there may be something that we are trying to have our student perform or have our student be able to work towards an IP goal that we may be able to piggyback off of the orientation mobility specialist part of the IEP when it comes to maybe physical education or physical therapy. So that collaboration is really key because that will help us all be working towards a common goal and not have this student be working on multiple goals at the same time for different specialists that the student may see. So as part of the collaborative assessment, you know, part of the educational team would include the school psychologist, the educational diagnostician, of course your teachers, the VI teacher and the classroom teacher, because we are looking at children who are in inclusionary settings, or at least to the maximum extent appropriate for that student so that they can access FAPE, which is free and appropriate public education. Then of course we have your support personnel. You've got your orientation mobility specialist, you have your occupational therapist, possibly physical therapist, possibly speech and language therapist, possibly an adaptive PE teacher, possibly a school nurse, and possibly, well, and one of the most important person on the team would be parents and guardians. I mean, that is something that I think you cannot have a collaborative assessment team without the input of the parents. And it's really important that they are an active participant in the assessment. They can provide data from home, how the student performs at home, how they're able to get around safely, Parents know their children way better than we could ever hope to know them. And so I really value parent input, and it's part of IDEA as well. So we really need to make sure that they are always a part of the team, especially the collaborative assessment teams. So the importance and benefits of collaboration between the TVI and the O&M. So collaboration between the TVI and O&M results in creating a fuller picture of the student's spatial concept development, which as a TVI we're looking for, and as an O&M, that's what they're looking for as well. When a TVI and the O&M work with a student at the same time, the net result is often more accurate information than either one would have garnered alone. And that's why I know it's hard to always have an orientation and mobility specialist with the TVI conducting assessments. It is definitely best practice. And whenever possible, it is highly beneficial to the students. The collaboration confirms that both disciplines are discovering similar patterns, or will allow assessors to discover areas that warrant further assessment. So again, in my experience working with an O&M as part of the TVI assessment team, a lot of times the orientation mobility specialist would be conducting a checklist, a screening, and they would know from that point whether or not the screening needs to turn into a full assessment. So while we are there working with the child on the functional vision and the learning media assessment and any AT assessment that we're doing, the orientation mobility specialist can then determine, while we have the child right there, whether or not to go on ahead and move the checklist over into a full assessment. So again, it's efficient. We have the child there. We're able to get information that is going to benefit both of our assessments that we have to perform for the child. Excuse me. And then, of course, the advantage of collaborative assessment is that while one of the assessors engages the student in an activity, the other can be recording how he or she responds to the directions. And in some of the video clips that we're going to watch, you will see evidence of that. You will see different assessors working with the student. You will see a speech and language pathologist working with a student and talking about directionality, talking about placement, above, below, underneath. So those are things that we look for as a TVI. We also look for as O&M. And, you know, the speech and language pathologist is also looking for that. So that collaborative assessment helps all of us get information without each one of us having to sit down with the student and ask the student to show us their skills. This way, there's multiple people gathering information about the student who may or may not be part of the vision team, but they are part of the assessment team. And so we're able to gather that information all at the same time from this child in one setting, which is beneficial for the child, definitely beneficial for the parents, so they don't have to take so many days or so much time off of work to do this. And so all around, the collaborative assessment is very beneficial, and it's just a lot of fun because you get ideas from different professions and professionals and things they're looking for. And then we'll also, if the child wasn't able to perform something that was requested of them from maybe the speech and language pathologist or from an OT or any other member of the team, we as vision professionals can say, well, she couldn't perform what you were asking her to perform because of her visual impairment. So you might want to be cautious when either giving her credit or not giving her credit for performing that skill for you on your assessment. If you don't give her credit because that's part of the standardization, then you need to make a note of the fact that she did not get the skill correct. However, because of her visual impairment may have actually impacted her ability to perform this skill. In order to perform the skill, she might need some kind of accommodation or modification to whatever it is that she was being asked to do. So that's also important because you can help other members of the team who are not vision professionals understand how our children perform, and not to discriminate against them because they couldn't perform an action due to their visual impairment. And that, I think, is one of the really important, I mean, there's so many things that are important in the assessment process, but I think that that is one of the most important things, because we understand and know how our children learn, and what they need to be successful and have access. And other evaluators are focused on giving a standardized assessment, and following those standardization rules, which don't allow for any flexibility for children with visual impairments. And so we have to step in and really advocate for the child, so that a more accurate picture is presented to the IEP team. The importance of TVI and O&M collaboration. Again, the O&M curriculum is varied and includes activities that are used throughout students' lives. Teachers of the children with visual impairments play a critical role in this area by promoting that development of concepts in young children, and by teaching basic O&M skills and other essential travel skills. So there is that, again, you can see this evidence of TVI and O&M collaboration, and how we really are more similar than we are different. So looking at a Venn diagram, you can see that we've got the TVI section here. We've got our O&M section here. Then you can also see here, right in the middle, where these two circles overlap in this Venn diagram, you can see the areas that are common when we are looking at assessment, and then, of course, instruction. So we are both looking for body image development, spatial concepts, development of spatial concepts. We are also looking for fine and gross motor skills, basic O&M skills that may be taught by a TVI or an O&M, exposure to the community, available goods and services and public transportation, and communication with the public. So here's a list, a small list. I'm sure there are a lot more. And again, we developed this list here in collaboration with each other, an O&M and a TVI together. And of course, Laura Lynn is also a TVI, so she's got the benefit of being both. And so developing this, I feel very comfortable in saying that, yes, these are things that we have in common when we're looking at instruction in common areas of need, and then the assessment that we are gathering data for to develop these IEPs for instruction in these areas of common need. Also on this, here's this just an example of selected components of an orientation mobility. And so if you look at this, you can also see how some of the components are very similar to those of the TVI. And so you've got the hierarchy of O&M concepts and skills. So we've got concept development, which for infants and preschoolers, we're looking at names of body parts, names of areas or items in the environment, the home, the neighborhood, park, stores, house of worship, use of vision, shapes, and sizes, and color. So and O&Ms are looking for that, and so are we. For elementary school, we are looking, all of us are looking for functions of body parts, generalization of concepts, familiar environments, being able to navigate those familiar environments and find your way to the areas of facilities that you need, especially at school. We're looking for ability to follow verbal and written directions, which is important for kids while they're in the classroom, but also important for kids when they're outside of the classroom with their orientation mobility specialist, so that they can cross streets safely or be able to navigate their neighborhood safely. And then, of course, identification of visual references. So we're also both working on both of those things. And then, of course, secondary school students, we're looking at body image and spatial concepts. And then, of course, all environments, all areas of school, home, workplace, airport, train, subway. So we might not, as TVIs, go to an airport or a train or subway. That's more of an O&M issue. But we definitely would work on school environments, home environments, and possibly workplace environments, depending on the situation and the student. So, you can see how things that we do overlap. Again, And of course, we have the sensory training that we do as TVIs, and of course, O&Ms do as well. Excuse me. So now, let's look at assessing instruction in common areas of need, like body image, spatial concept development, fine and gross motor skills, okay? So what we're going to be looking at here is criterion-referenced assessment, which is very different from standardized assessment, because we are measuring performance of the individual skills of the child, and we're not really necessarily comparing them to anybody else, which is what a standardized assessment does, standardized and normed assessment does. So this type of assessment, of course, enables us as educators to find the performance level of a child who's visually impaired or blind, and helps us select those long and short-term objectives that we would develop as a result of the assessment data and our collaboration and discussion over the data. And then it also helps us record the acquisition of skills for children who are visually impaired. So we're able to really measure where they are, and then start using their skills of where they are and start moving them forward along that continuum of skills to keep them moving forward towards independence and towards successful transition into either college or work. So the common assessment in the 8 developmental areas that we all are looking for: cognitive, language, socialization, but in particular here, for what we are looking at for the things that are in common for VI and O&M, and some of the examples, videos that you're going to see, we're looking at vision, compensatory, self-help, fine motor, and gross motor. So then we assess for all major skills needed by a student who is visually impaired or blind in preparation for school and daily living, right? So we look for such skills as prerequisites for O&M and Braille. So it's nice to have an O&M there to let you know whether or not the student is displaying those prerequisites for O&M, either via checklist or a full-blown complete assessment. And so we are looking for those things as well when we're collaborating with an O&M and the TVI. Of course, the TVI is looking at the acquisition or prerequisites for Braille. And so, but the orientation mobility specialist can also use that information to help them determine whether or not the student needs O&M at this time, or would benefit from maybe holding off and focusing more on some other tactile acquisition or prerequisites before moving on to O&M. So now, let's look at some video clips of a collaborative assessment. As you look at the clips, be sure to take notes. Make a list of those skills that you see that are both O&M and VI skills, okay? They're concentrate on the areas of body image development, spatial concept development, fine and gross motor skills, okay? And then any additional skill observations are also good to make note of, okay? But just focus on those while we are looking at some of the videos, okay? And I am going to open the video and move it over for you. And we are going to focus on, that's our arena assessment, our play-based assessment. And that is me sitting there talking with her, but we're going to look at her performance on these skills here, copying body movement. Okay, so that's one example. We are going to watch another example. And I'm going to find exactly where we should be. Oh, I actually need to go back to the previous one. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's that video. So now let's take a look at this next video here. Now you see the speech therapist is sitting next to the child, and the TVI is standing across the room trying to measure some distance viewing. Okay, so there's that video. So I hope you're seeing some of the commonalities here, and really enjoying watching this video because she is watching these videos because she is just too adorable. But this is just an example of that collaborative assessment with the TVI, me as the educational diagnostician, and slash TVI, but I was the coordinator for this evaluation, so I'm kind of having to play both. But I have a TVI there who is looking for those certain skills. And the orientation mobility specialist is also there doing a checklist, and you will see her in some of the other videos a little later. But you'll also notice the speech therapist involved in the assessment and taking data from what the speech therapist is doing. So let's watch this video here. Okay, so we have an example there. Okay, and then there's a couple other videos here. I know I'm showing you little short clips, but I know that I don't want to, I mean, I could be here forever with you all because I love talking about this stuff, but I'm trying to manage the time and give you some videos so that you can be making notes, and then we're going to talk about how we can share our notes as a part of a collaborative effort for this particular webinar, and that way this information can be shared with others who you may be working with on an IEP team or assessment team. Okay, so let me find the right place for this particular video. Okay. So there, this is me working with the student, doing some assessment. Of course, kids want to go outside and play, which is nice because we can get that O&M assessment there. You notice the speech therapist back here is making note of the skills that the child is displaying. Okay, I'm gonna fast forward us to another part of the video so we can look at more of the skills that we'd be looking for in common. Hmm. Um, Maybe I clicked on the wrong area here. Let me fast forward here. Over here is our nurse consultant. Parents are in the background getting interviewed. Oh, I'm sorry. This is our speech therapist, not our nurse consultant. Our nurse consultant is over here interviewing the parent. Okay, so we will move on to another video. Just a couple more clips to show you. Let me. Why is, I just saw this earlier. I'm not sure why this is. Okay, well, I will, that particular video clip was showing the speech therapist working with Kaylee on prepositions of under, above, next to. So I'm not sure what the error is, but I guess, let me just make sure I still have internet access. Yep. So I will try. Let's do the next video and go from there. Oh no, I hope this one works. Okay, I figured it out. I've got the video back. I don't know what that was, but you know, it never fails. You always have some kind of a technical glitch, but got it figured out. So we will watch this video clip and notice the speech therapist looking for things that the TVI and the O&M both look for. Okay, well, let's move on to the next video here. So you can see here the orientation mobility specialist. Okay, and one more. And we are going to, I'm going to try it this other way. Okay, so you can see there are lots of skills that we are looking for in common, just watching the videos of this little student. I hope you had a good time looking at the videos. I always love looking at it. Reminds me so much of one of my favorite times in my career when I was able to do this type of work and continue with that. And now I still kind of do that, but just not full time. But you can see some of how we work together with TVI, O&M, Ed Diag, or school psychologist, the speech and language pathologist, all of us together doing this assessment, and we're all able to find skills for each of our individual assessments, looking for particular skills for what it is that we need in order to determine programming, placement, and services for the student. So just taking a look at a poster that we had individuals at a face-to-face presentation put on sticky notes some of the areas that they noticed that a TVI would be assessing, which you can see that here. Some of the areas that an orientation mobility specialist would be assessing, and then the common areas of skills that we are looking for in our assessments. So just by looking at this poster, it is very clear how much our assessments overlap in the skills that we are looking to measure on a student. So I have a closer up picture of the orientation mobility side, sequencing, spatial awareness, body parts, shape recognition, navigating obstacles. And then the TVI side, we've got writing, I thought that was writing. I remember I wrote that down. It's hard to read that one, but we've got shift of gaze, scanning, light sensitivity, light gazing, contrast and color, maybe a possible head tilt, depth perception, color contrast, some scanning, some tracking. So what I did was, because some of these are so hard to read, I put together this Padlet that had the common areas of assessment, what was on that poster for the TVI. So we've got counting, head tilt, spatial awareness, contrast and color, another contrast and color, color contrast, depth perception, shift of gaze, light gazing, light sensitivity, and then the O&M, sequencing, person to person and object to object, body parts, any shape recognition, and navigating obstacles. But then the middle here has both. Both TVI and O&M are looking for these things that are in common for their particular assessment. Spatial awareness, matching pictures from a distance, color identification, adapting to new environment, counting one-to-one correspondence, peripheral, searching and scanning, body parts, life skills like utensils, stirring. There was a video of her going in the kitchen and looking at objects and the different jobs. I didn't show that to you. It was a long video, so I just wanted to be sure I got to the main things that we could pull out and still get the point across. Matching pictures, grasping, how she interacted with the playground, eye-hand coordination. So you can see all of these different things and how collaborative assessment, we can pull together all of the things we're looking for. And it makes so much sense to do this than having to pull a child for each one of us separately to do our assessment, but we can easily do it together. So now what I have done is I've created a link to Padlet. So you can take your notes from the videos, you can use your notes and write them down on the Padlet, and it's like a sticky note. So you will write down skills that were assessed on the Padlet, and then you can place your sticky note under the provider who would assess that skill. So if both providers assess that skill, place it in the column or columns where you feel it belongs. The Padlet will remain open so that you all can collaborate and show others, and also to keep this moving forward. For you, I'm sorry, it says to you, and for you, for your assessment and IEP teams. And you can also, this is just a fun way to get everyone involved, even though you're seeing this as a webinar, but you can still be involved in this collaborative exercise, even if you are seeing it at different times. And so, happy posting. Let me show you what the Padlet looks like. So when you click on that link, you will see the TVI column, and like there's one for skipping, and that might also be over here in the O&M area. Or you can put in both areas, TVI and O&M. So there are 3 columns. Couldn't do a Venn diagram. The Padlet doesn't work that way. Or maybe it does, and I'm just not tech savvy enough for it. But this is something that you can do to collaborate, even if you're not all in the same room together. So I wanted to make sure that that opportunity was available to you as well. Okay, again, happy posting with that. And thank you so much for your time and attention to this. And I hope you were able to walk away from this webinar with some good information and helpful information to help us collaborate more and for the benefit of us as professionals and for the benefit of our students. Again, thank you. My contact information is available here. If you have any questions, any comments, you're more than welcome to email me, and I would be more than happy to help you with anything you might request, any documents or anything else that I can help you with. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity, and I hope to see you again soon.